Hello, welcome to Church Searcher. My name is Chris and we're here on Flodden Field in Northumberland, not far from the Scottish border on the English side, and it's here on the 9th of September 1513 that a huge battle took place between the Scottish army led by King James IV of Scotland and an English army who had been raised in the name of Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII's first wife, who had recently been made Regent of England while he was away fighting in France. And so it was here on the 9th of September 1513 in the fields where this momentous battle took place. And it was in the aftermath of that battle that the body of King James IV, his nobles and earls, were laid to rest overnight in St Paul's Church, right on the edge of the battlefield here in the village of Branxton. So come with me now as we explore the remarkable battlefield here and the church of St Paul, which now stands as a memorial to peace. The battlefield here is quite unique in that the topography of the landscape, along with the weapons used, were key to understanding how the battle unfolded. And it's the Remembering Flodden projects that have done an amazing job here, memorialising the battle in the form of a trail which takes you all the way around the battlefield and gives you a really good understanding of how the battle unfolded. So it's here on Piper's Hill on Flodden Field that we have this memorial to the fallen of the battle, and it's dedicated to the brave on both sides. And it's along this ridge where the cross stands that the English army were arrayed, facing the Scottish army behind me here on Branxton Hill. Now, to put all this into context, Henry VIII had recently gone to war with France in 1513 against Louis XII, leaving Catherine of Aragon, his first wife, as Regent of England, protecting the country, especially the north here, from invasion. And it was the year previous where Louis XII had actually renewed the old alliance with Scotland, and upon the invasion of Henry VIII, he called upon James IV of Scotland to help. So on the 19th of August, King James IV of Scotland rose an army in Edinburgh and proceeded to cross the border with England on the 22nd of August, which around here is formed by the River Tweed. He then proceeded to take the castles at Norham and Wark and essentially controlled an 8-mile stretch of the border there. From there they went on and took the castles of Ford and Etal, not far from here, essentially protecting their eastern flank. They then took a position on Flodden Hill, which is about 1.5 miles from here, and dug in there. Now, the Scottish army had invested heavily in the latest weapons. They were armed with pikes, trained by French men-at-arms, supplied by Louis XII, and they also had heavy cannons, which required 36 oxen to pull them. They were very slow-moving, but very powerful, and they dug them into the hill. So it was on the 25th of August that news finally reached Pontefract in Yorkshire about the Scottish invasion. And it was the Earl of Surrey there, Thomas Howard, who was the commander of the armies in the north. And he set about mustering his men, marching north to Durham, where they were given the standard of St Cuthbert, which had previously been used in the 12th and 14th century successfully in battles between the English and the Scots. And it's from there that Thomas Howard wrote to King James IV of Scotland, inviting him to battle on Millfield Plain, not far from here, no later than the 9th of September. However, upon arriving at Millfield Plain, he discovered that King James IV was nowhere to be seen, having dug himself into his entrenchments here on Flodden Hill. And it's said that King James IV responded to Thomas Howard's request with the reply that he would not take orders from any mere earl. It's at this point that a character called the Bastard Heron joined the English army with intimate knowledge of the landscape around here. And he advised that rather than taking the Scots head on at Flodden Hill, they instead take a wide flanking manoeuvre around to the east, crossing the River Twill by the Twisel Bridge, and instead coming to meet the Scots from the north, effectively cutting off their supply lines. And so it was here on the morning of the 9th of September that King James IV awoke to his surprise to find the English army arrayed to the north here. And so he had to move his whole army, the heavy cannons, a couple of miles from Flodden Hill to Branxton Hill behind us here, this time facing the opposite direction, north, to meet the English army. So it's on the ridge where the monument stands where the English units were arrayed, and then ahead of us here along the ridge that the Scottish set up with their heavy guns. And so the battle unfolded in several separate engagements here in the valley and on this flat area here. And it's here where the Scottish left flank came down and engaged the English on this flat area, with the Scottish left flank led by Hume and Huntley facing the English led by Sir Edmund Howard. Now the Scottish heavy guns were pretty ineffective in this battle. They were very slow, hard to manoeuvre, and because they'd been put in position quite quickly, they couldn't really find range. And so they were firing over the heads of the English, who on the other hand had the more manoeuvrable falconets, smaller guns, smaller shot, and they could fire with more success into the Scottish. The Scottish heavy guns were using heavy stone cannonballs. It took about 45 minutes to reload, 36 oxen required to pull them. They were massive, but they just couldn't hit the English here. And so it meant that the Scottish were forced to come down into the valley and engage the English with their pikes. And they had just adopted the pikes. They'd been successfully used on the continent, and they had been trained here by the French to use the pikes in tight formation. And they engaged the English on this flat area and pretty much completely wiped out the English. They inflicted heavy casualties on the English soldiers here. So for a while it seemed like the English right flank here, commanded by Edmund Howard, were going to be completely wiped out. However, they were literally rescued at the last moment by the cavalry turning up. Lord Dacre's cavalry came around from behind the ridge here, which had been shielding, screening their progress from the Scots, and took the Scottish left flank and Hume by surprise here, and successfully fought back the Scots, allowing the English to retreat, and Lord Hume did the same. But effectively for Hume, the Scots commander on this left flank, it felt like he'd won the day, and he retired back up the hill. The English retired to their positions, and Hume effectively played no more part in the battle here, and he was later beheaded because of his actions here on the field. So having seen the success of the Scots on the left flank, the Scottish army in the centre here came charging down from Branxton Hill with their pikes to meet the English army. They came down this steep slope. The English had more of a gentle slope to march down with their shorter bills. Now billhooks were a shorter weapon, about 8 foot long, tipped with a curved bladed hook and a point and an axe point, but no match effectively for the 18-foot long pikes with their long spike on the end. However, as the Scots reached the bottom of the hill, they found themselves suddenly getting bogged down in marshy terrain. There'd been a lot of rain overnight, and in fact the whole week before there'd been a lot of rain, so a marsh and a bog had developed at the bottom of the hill here. So suddenly the Scots found themselves at a disadvantage. It was hard to manoeuvre with these long 18-foot pikes, and the troops at the front were struggling up to their knees in mud with the pressure of the hundreds of troops who were streaming down after them, behind them as well. So a lot of the troops at the front actually ended up abandoning their pikes and taking up their sidearms, swords and axes, which then meant they were now at a disadvantage to the English with their 8-foot long billhooks. The English were also on the higher grounds now with the bog down below them. So they were fighting down onto the Scots, and they managed to hack their way through them to the point that the Scottish centre here was pretty much decimated. it was a disaster for the Scots. The tide had completely turned. So it's climbing up the hill behind me here that gives you a real appreciation of the steepness of the slope that the Scots had to charge down. And it's down here that the central part of the Scottish army descended, and it's along the hill from here where King James IV would have watched the battle unfold from this vantage point. You can see across to the left flank behind me. However, the English ridge shields his view of Lord Dacre's cavalry charge coming around the back of the ridge and taking the Scottish left flank by surprise. So it's around this area here that we move from the centre of the Scottish positions towards the right flank, and it's over this way that King James IV of Scotland would have watched the battle unfold beneath him. And he would have seen his troops, estimated to be between 30 and 40,000 men, facing the English army, estimated to be around between 20 and 25,000 men. There are also about 30 to 40,000 people in the baggage train of Scotland further this way. The Scots were armed with the latest in battle technology, their heavy guns requiring 36 oxen to pull them, largely ineffective here, and also his troops armed with 8,000 pikes, supplied by and trained by the French. Now the pikes were originally developed by the Swiss, used to great effect on the continent, especially against cavalry, but here the Scots had only had a few weeks to get familiar with this new style of fighting, which required compact columns and groups using these long pikes. And here they were rudely exposed by a combination of the terrain and landscape, the weather conditions, and of course the English billhook. Now it's from here that King James IV of Scotland made the fateful decision to descend down into the valley with his earls and nobles and clan chiefs leading the right flank down into the valley bottom. He was known as a bit of an impetuous, hot-headed leader, taking too many risks when he perhaps shouldn't, especially in battle. And here, down in the valley bottom, they found themselves in the same situation as the troops in the centre. So it was down here into the boggy bottom of the valley that James unwisely dismounted from his horse and led his troops down into. And again, they get caught up in the quagmire, faced with the English billhooks, where you've got this big continuation of the boggy terrain. You can see it going all the way along the valley to my side here, which is where King James fought against the English. He was followed by Argyll and Lennox, noblemen who led their Highlanders down in assistance of their king. But effectively, they boxed in the king here in this morass, and they were surprised by the arrival of more English from down the valley. The English longbowmen, archers led by Lord Stanley, arrived late to the battle, and they broadsided Lennox and Argyll with their arrows here. And it was famously one of the most effective uses of longbows in British warfare, pretty much wiping out all of the troops here. Cut off from escape further down the valley and boxed in by his troops behind, it's down here in this boggy terrain that King James IV unfortunately was killed. He was found later surrounded by his bodyguards, also dead, down in the valley here, and his body was taken to rest overnight in St Paul's Church in Branxton, which is where we'll go next. Now it's the Scottish poet and author Sir Walter Scott who immortalised the Battle of Flodden in his long-form poem Marmion. And in the 6th canto he writes about the battle. Tweed's echoes heard the ceaseless plash when many a broken band, disordered, through her currents dash to gain the Scottish land. To town and tower, to down and dale, to tell red Flodden's dismal tale, and raise the universal wail. Tradition, legend, tune and song shall many an age that wail prolong. Still from the sire the son shall hear of the stern strife and carnage drear of Flodden's fatal field. So it's estimated that up to 14,000 men were killed here in these fields as part of this battle, which is an extraordinary number. And that comprises between 1,000 and 4,000 English, between 7,000 and 10,000 Scottish. Not only that, after the end of the battle, of course, the remaining Scots had to get back over the border with the English facing them. And so they were picked off as they tried to retreat. Not only that, you had the 20 to 40,000 people making up the baggage train up there on Branxton Hill and still on Flodden Hill. And they were set upon by the English. An order of no quarter was given here for this battle. And that's one of the reasons why the casualty rates were so high here in these bloody fields. So this is St Paul's Church here in Branxton, and it's inside here that King James IV's body was brought after the battle and laid to rest overnight until the next day. Now this current church dates from 1849 and it was built in the neo-Norman style, and you can see the doorway there, the arch resembles a Norman door. But as we go inside we'll see there's actually a 12th century arch around the chancel, which is where King James IV's body laid. It's built using local sandstone and whinstone, and you can see it's got ashlar dressing along the windows and the corners there. So inside the church here, it's incredibly tranquil, peaceful, quiet. Very simple. At the far end, you can just make out what was the Norman arch there. Originally from the 12th century, it's had its curved arch replaced with a pointed arch in the 13th century. but it's inside that chancel at the end there that King James IV's body was brought and laid overnight after the battle. Now there's some chairs there today just cordoning off the chancel because there's some loose plasterwork overhead, but we'll look in and get a sense of the area where King James's body laid. And a final thing of interest here on our way out are these doors that were put in 2013 on the 500th anniversary of the Battle of Flodden. Made of local oak, you can see that there's a pair of trees etched in to the glass here. On one side we've got an English oak, and on the other side a Scots pine representing the two armies. And in between we've got a river flowing. Now this might represent the River Tweed, perhaps, the border with Scotland. At the base of each tree we've also got some more symbolism, with a ploughshare on this side and a pruning hook on here. Now interestingly, the English bill hook was an evolution of traditional pruning tool for trimming hedges and trees. So these both reference a Bible quote from Isaiah chapter 2 verse 4. And they shall beat their swords into ploughshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift sword up against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. So that is the Battle of Flodden in St Paul's Church here in Branxton. And I think you'll agree the Remembering Flodden project has done an amazing job creating the battlefield trail there, all the interpretation boards, leaflets. They've got a website which you can visit. They've even got what's claimed to be the world's smallest tourist information centre here in the village. Now if you're interested in the Battle of Flodden, as well as visiting the website, you can have a look at the video I made on St Oswald's Church in Arncliffe in the Yorkshire Dales, where men from the valley there marched all the way up here with their bill hooks and longbows to fight on the English side at the battle. So if you enjoyed the video, please do leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more. Let me know down below if you know of any churches that you think that I should visit. And until next time, keep church searching.